Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I know that there will be some more people walking in. It's sometimes a little hard to find. But as we get started right now, I am Maarten Rotman. I'm the Assistant Dean for Medical Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Dell Medical School's Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And in that office, we are hosting today our very first Visionaries in Innovation and Practice seminar. So I want to thank you for being in our inaugural version of that. And it is going to be an interactive fireside chat. And that means that we have two people here up front that I'm very happy to introduce to you today. They are both truly visionaries in this field and have been very influential in my own personal career, in fact. And so I'm happy to introduce, first of all, Dr. Pamela York, who has spent about 25 years or so turning scientific breakthroughs into companies that matter. She, as a founder, as a managing partner of Capita 3, which is a venture capital firm up in Minnesota, she invests in early stage healthcare innovation. And she brings, she does that very well successfully. She has more than 200 deals, more than 100 companies that were either launched or accelerated through her influence. And she has a track record that includes IPOs such as Spark Therapeutics, which had an Orchid Cellmark IPO, Princeton Lightwave, which acquisition by Argo AI. And before all that, she built at the University of Iowa commercialization infrastructure from scratch, really thinking what it takes for good ideas to really move all the way to clinical practice. She had 1,000 technologies portfolios, she had 50 startups that came out of it. She created a full funding funnel before other universities tried that model out successfully as well. She's mentored founders through Techstars, through Revolution Ventures, through Matter Health. She has chaired startup and nonprofit boards across the country. She also leads Capita 3 Leader, which is a TED and NPR featured program that has helped more than 800 healthcare innovators clear those hidden barriers between vision and impact, basically helping people really do that step moving forward. She has a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, 12 patents and 40 publications. And she bets on people who have the audacity to change how medicine works. So if I can invite you to come up front and join us here. Thank you. So it's a chat, so there will be two people here up front. The other visionary is Dr. Stephen Ecker. Steve is a scientist who built things. He has more than 23,000 citations from impactful papers all over the science ecosystem. He's a co-inventor of some of the most widely used genome editing tools in biomedical research. And he spent 3 decades pushing the boundaries of what is genetically possible and is now accelerating that with what is computationally possible. He's the Associate Dean for Innovation and Entrepreneurship in our office here at Dell Medical School, and he's building the infrastructure for the next generation of physicians, scientists, and health innovators at UT Austin. And he's also a serial entrepreneur himself. He has co-founded multiple companies that translate academic discoveries into clinical reality. Steve, I know, believes that AI disruption in healthcare is not coming. He believes that it's already here. And he's taking the lead in actively making that AI native hospital of the future happen today. And so with that, I'd like to invite you as well up to the front. And I'm going to give you both have mics, and I'm going to give you the floor for your conversation. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, Pam, first question. Why are you in town?
Well, first of all, thank you, Maarten, for that very nice introduction. And it's lovely to be here in Austin. I'm here for South by. I judge the healthcare pitch session tomorrow morning, but also, you know, there's a growing startup and venture capital ecosystem here in healthcare and related fields, and so I'm here for that.
Oh, great. So maybe I'll ask, who in the audience is here because of South by? I know there's at least one. Okay, good. So, Chris, why are you here?
See some old friends.
Mm-hmm.
To see some old friends from Minnesota, which is where I'm from. I'm down here for South by, first time here, just sort of scouting that out, getting the lay of the land. There's a lot to absorb. It's big, but I really didn't expect to be holding a microphone, so I'm going to give this back to you.
Well,
Did
so-
say it's interactive.
So Pam, we were talking briefly. So we have a really great, in this audience, I can recognize many of you. There's a really great audience. So I'm just going to say for the audience, we're trying to build South by adjacent planning and collaboration and cross-fertilization. So if you've got ideas or any of you are doing South by, I'd like us to share. So that's one of the things we can do even when we're done here. Like, so I'm going to introduce Chris to the Capital Factory House program, because I think that'd be a great place for you to get integrated. So these are kinds of programs that have. So Pam, we were chatting. I just want to offer, when we were thinking about this series, I like it. I like to say it's like staging a house. It's really hard to imagine innovation when it's an empty house, or even just blueprints for a house, right? And so we wanted to bring people, and I wanted to call it the Mensch series. So that's where I've thought about it. And we had something, simpler, I think. But so how do you see, how can you help us with vision? How can you help us when we don't even have the blueprint set? How do you help us imagine vision and go from ideas to design to implementation? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I've worked with 3 states in the Midwest, and I think 5 cities, including Minneapolis, Chicago, and Iowa City, really working on how do we build our startup and venture ecosystem. And the academic version of that is an additional conversation, because there's more pieces to it. And the first thing I would say is that you have these gems here. I mean, you have these universities, UT Austin, and if you don't have a source of ideas, it's pretty hard to build a venture and startup ecosystem. You could potentially build it around other things that are not technology related. But so you already have this, this gem here that is sort of the basis for the idea, or one of the bases for idea generation. And then the thing that I find interesting, having worked with so many different people and communities, they all sort of lament, well, we don't have this, or we don't have the blueprint, or, they're always sort of looking at it from the perspective of, we're here and we need to be here. And so that's the first message, is it's pretty much the same everywhere you go. And if you think about it from a systems perspective, you have to take a systems approach for really building the ecosystem, which is what you're doing. So from there, I think, especially in a university environment, this know-how, am I working on something? Am I doing research that has commercial potential? Do I even care about that as a faculty researcher? If I did care about it, how do I know if I have a good idea? And so on. So this whole kind of understanding of the steps that one would take is really critical to build that know-how within the university.
Yeah. So I love the perspective you bring, because you've been inside academia, you're outside as a community builder, you've got a fiduciary responsibility to your investors in Capita 3. And so you have to think about that whole range. So as you're thinking about that range, where do you think that, there's the better understanding of what works, and then where do you think the bottlenecks are? Because that seems to me that staging, that trio is critical at all, wherever your ecosystem is.
Yep. Well, tell me what you think the bottlenecks are here. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So.
Or anybody for that matter.
So that's a good question. So I'm gonna open up for you guys, and I'm gonna offer, I've been here 2.5 years. I would say the most common question, the number one question I get is, where are the CEOs?
Mm-hmm.
And then I dig into it, and it's not the CEOs that they care about. What are they really asking me?
What are they really asking you?
Yeah.
I don't
They
know.
want the money.
Oh,
They
the
want
money. Yeah,
from
where's the
CEOs.
money?
It has nothing to do with CEOs,
Yep.
right? It's that they think the CEOs are the access to the capital. But I'm like, CEOs and capital, that's the horse and the hay. They go together, right? And so if you don't have the hay, you don't have the CEOs. You don't have the CEOs, you don't have the hay, right? And so what I think makes these work are the concept of the flywheel. You build the farm to make the hay, so that you have this, right? I mean, you've got to do the farming, you've got to do that working, and you've got to start building, right? And I feel like we're putting the argument that we don't have the CEOs, and I'm like, but we actually have a lot of people that do the farming and build, right? And so I'm just giving it as an example. I don't have the answer, but that's the kind of questions that I've got. So I'm going to open up to the audience. What do you think is our biggest bottlenecks? I know there's a lot of leaders in the room that think about this.
Our biggest
Bottleneck.
Bottleneck.
Okay, sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
Yeah, there's a microphone.
Okay, bottlenecks. I would just say, so I'm a clinician with some interest and curiosity in the innovation space. First of all, I think we see a lot of problems that we identify in our practice in critical care medicine, which is a very tech-heavy part of the healthcare space. And we don't have solutions. When solutions come, like working with the biomedical engineering school here and this brilliant senior design project here, the capstone project, there's a lot of intellectual property developed. And taking that really, I think, to the next level. And I've learned that, writing an SBIR grant can help you move that forward. First step, and now you have something to show to take it to the next step. So I think that in that space, I see personally, from what I personally have experienced, that if there was a way to move that forward, those things, get a little patent work going, get a little prototype tested, and start a clinical trial somewhere. Yeah, that's what I see. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. What else?
So while people are thinking, I'll just jump in and talk a little bit about my experiences with universities. I would say the biggest bottleneck is lack of know-how.
What do you mean by know-how?
Meaning, is my idea something that's worthy of commercialization, let alone a startup formation? So really, do I have a good idea? If I have a good idea, what do I do about that? That's the biggest bottleneck. And when you combine that with, basic research should be separated from business, which is kind of an ethos we have in our academic communities, then you create this environment where it's hard to move ideas forward. So the first step is putting very simple processes in place for helping people to understand, here's how you go about understanding if you have an idea that should be moved towards or could be moved towards commercialization. Usually the technology transfer groups do that. Not all universities have those, but it's a pretty straightforward process to start looking at, do I have a decent idea? Then the next bottleneck comes in funding. And so, you're used to having research grants. There's also venture financing, angel financing, venture financing, and then SBIRs come before that. But there's this gap between where you might be with your research and where you can apply for an SBIR. There's a huge gap. So there's not knowing if I have a good idea and if I do, what to do about it. And then even if I did know what to do about it, where does the money come from to do that? So one of the most valuable things that you can do is put a gap funding program in place. Does that exist here? Is that something?
So we have a progression of ideas, and we have a unique program that's it's called Texas Health Catalyst, and I'm advocating for the 3B model, the bench to business to bedside model. The key is that this happens pre-disclosure. So this is very early. This is at the earliest stages. We just had our meeting yesterday. And so you've got a problem solution pair, typically academics, and then we bring in, Ruben's here and Nicole, and we bring in up to over 300 advisors with their domain expertise, and they provide that third arm. And they're non-UT, so they can give us honest answer, feedback, because doesn't matter. I mean, they're truly objective, but that they want to support us and they make it. And that provides a commercialization hypothesis for that problem solutions, right?
Got it.
And we have programs like ICOR. So sometimes the next stage is ICOR. Sometimes there's a different de-risking, and we will participate in that de-risking. And so I inherited that, came here. We've been building and accelerating it. We hit an amazing milestone. That project has had 600 plus applicants, roughly 60 have been funded. And in follow-on funding, those which are earliest stage now hit over $100 million in follow-on funding for those projects. And so what we've been doing is figuring out how we can build that. Texas State put 2 proposals in this cycle. So we're trying to build, we actually opened it up to not just faculty innovators, but now staff innovators, student innovators, residents. We're trying to provide the fund. So that's a cycle. There are some follow-up supports like ICOR. There's some funding through the Tech Transfer Office. What my read is there's a gap in the next step.
Yeah.
And so we're calling it Texas Health Startups for the health side. And I'm hoping we'll be announcing no later than Innovation Week at the end of April what that means for us. And so, that's our approach to that problem. I would just offer that, the SBIR needs to be reissued, right? So the Senate passed the reissuing unanimously, but it's still through the House and the President. So SBIR right now is a real challenge, right? So we need to come up with other strategies, right, for that funding. So rather than a gap, what we're trying to do is set the innovation momentum earlier on.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it also provides a forcing function where our tech transfer, because they're like, okay, if we've already gotten a business hypothesis, that means the IP direction has alignment.
Yep.
And so I'm hoping that means that the patentability and the issuance of those patents, right, is better and the claims are more valuable. So we will see. We haven't really done that deep analysis, but that's the kind of structure what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so that's why you're saying the big bottleneck is where are the CEOs?
That's right.
Okay. How many people here think that faculty should not be the CEO of their own company? How many people think that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I went from industry to University of Iowa to build this, kind of this whole system that we're talking about, and the dean of the business school told me, "You'll fail. You're not going to make this happen here," and he turned out to be wrong. But what he was right about was that there was this culture with these perceptions about how things should or shouldn't be. And one of the perceptions was that faculty shouldn't be running their own companies. And that was a very hard and fast. It wasn't a rule. Speak up. Are you telling me to lift this up? Okay.
I think it's the microphone you want still.
Yeah, that's what this is, right? I'll just do this for now. Can you guys hear me in the back?
Great. Yeah. It's better.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to clip this thing, so maybe I can just hold it like this. This is fine. So what he was not wrong about was that, and that perception. And so what we started with was creating an entrepreneur in residence program. So we recruited, this is University of Iowa, it's in the middle of nowhere. We had to recruit people from other cities to come and be entrepreneurs in residence who ultimately could be CEOs of these companies. That was the idea. And so we created this whole system for doing that. And what happened was it was very, very hard to find a CEO that could match with the researchers in a way that was successful. It was extremely difficult to do that. Now, if you were in the Bay Area, you probably could get that done. But most of us don't have these massive communities of people who know how to be a CEO of a very early stage company. And so oftentimes there was just a mismatch in personalities, and usually a mismatch in an understanding of what it takes for researchers to actually be involved in this work, all the responsibilities that they had, the culture of the university. And so that program failed miserably. I think we had one EIR become a CEO of one company. And so what we changed to was creating programs for a faculty member's graduate students to actually take positions with the company as the person leading the company initially. So the company's still very early. It's mostly the work is still being done kind of under the auspices of the university or in some nearby laboratory. It's not mature enough to kind of stand on its own and raise capital. So a lot of the work is research or development. And so we found that the graduate students were really those who had an interest in and an appetite towards commercialization turned out to be great candidates for leading these companies forward. Some of them wound up becoming CEOs of the companies. Sometimes the faculty would take leave and be CEO of the company. Ultimately, they had to find their own CEO. There wasn't anything, we discovered this is not our job, is to find them a CEO. We're not going to be able to do that. If the company is going to succeed, they have to find that right person. If you ever hired anybody, you understand that completely, right? I can't choose who should work for you. So I would say that, faculty can make fantastic CEOs. Mm-hmm. It's just like take any person in the world. Are they right to be are they right for being a startup CEO or not? It's not really different in that analysis for faculty, except for that you have to take into account all the other responsibilities that you have. I had one company, there was a spin out of the University of Minnesota. It was called Core Biome. It was microbiome services 6-7 years ago.
They're a Wally Tank team.
That's right. They won the Wally Tank. A Steve invention. But all three of the founders were faculty. One of them became the CEO. All three of them were on the board. The CEO took about a 25% reduction in his academic time for 2 years, and the company had an exit in 2.5 years for a really good multiple on invested capital. So I'm not saying that faculty should be startup CEOs. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's very person dependent. And that's really, so do away with the preconceived notion about what will or won't work for CEOs.
Yeah, I just want to offer, so since the event, South by Southwest adjacent event is the Nucleate event, where the Texas Nucleate branch is hosting. So who here has heard about the Nucleate group on campus? All right. So the Nucleate evolved out of George Church's lab in Boston, 2 grad students, because they were being told by Boston investors that graduate students are not good enough to be in leadership in biotechs because they hadn't worked 20 years in a biotech company. And so I would describe it that's the East Salty Coast view, whereas in contrast to the Y Combinator, where you want to bring they can teach 50% competency in business to a deep tech person way better than trying to teach 50% of deep tech to a MBA, right? And so it evolved out of the Boston, and now it's global. And so I've had the privilege of working with the founders when I was dean of the grad school. And so we have an awesome Nucleate chapter. It is not UT affiliated, meaning UT does not pay. This is run, but it is entirely graduate student run. So there's an event tomorrow, UT Texas House or something like that. If you need, but Nucleate is the brand. Mm-hmm. So the point is they're getting training with projects so that they can demonstrate they have a track record mm-hmm. of being able to go through this. Now, in contrast, I have faculty telling me that the death of a grad student in their lab is the grad student participates in ICOR. So we have both of these things happening at the same time here on the 40 acres.
Yeah.
So how did you handle, I'm sure those are the kinds of ranges that you got. So how did you handle those ranges of opinions of the faculty? Because those students are entirely beholden to the mentorship of the lab they're working in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did, academic, universities have their way of doing things. They have their culture. And I'm going to answer your question, but it's a little bit of a circuitous way. And University of Iowa was very, very focused on basic research. Business was kind of an evil thing. And I think there's other places where that's sort of the mentality. And actually, I learned some time ago that this idea of keeping basic research and business separate came from the very first director of the National Science Foundation. Other countries don't necessarily think that way. So this is a culture that's been created in this country, and we've kind of been trying to undo it for a long time. It's why commercialization metrics have been added to SBIRs and even some of the basic research grants. But so we had to spend a lot of time undoing that thinking. Business is evil. If I do applied research, my peers will think of me as less than. And so partly what we did was just educating people about if you have something important that you're working on and you really want that to get out into the world, you can't just give it away. There's this notion that you can give it to the world and somehow it will get out there. I think there's things for which that is true. The technologies that universities tend to work on, it's not true. It takes capital. And somebody has to benefit from, the expenditure of that capital. And so commercialization is really the route. And so helping people to understand, you market to federal agencies, you write grants specifically to federal agencies, you market to them to get funding. You wouldn't call it marketing, but that's essentially what it is. So what's wrong with marketing a product into a marketplace for which it would be really beneficial? So that kind of thing over a long period of time. And then also we took, some of the best inventions came from some of the top faculty at the University of Iowa. They were very well funded, they were very well respected people, and we made those people visible. We made them very visible, and we also created, this was a very stepwise process. When I was asked to come in and do it at the University of Iowa, I said I'm going to do this in 3 years. It took me 6, and I still wasn't, nearly where I wanted it to be. But it has to be a slow stepwise process because you're changing culture. But one of the things that faculty wanted was additional funding for their graduate students. So we created funding programs out of the Vice President for Research to pay for graduate students to do commercialization. So it was a self-selection process. It's what they wanted. And as more people saw that, this is a source of funding for me and the work that I want to do, it caught on and more people did that.
That's great. Well, you've given me a to-do list, making sure our VPR is willing to listen and participate. So that's great. So I'm going to turn to the audience just for a minute. What do you think about our culture? What do you see that is working? Oh, so is there an answer in the back? Yeah, we'll go back to that. Don't do it. Come on.
I think it might be related to the past question as well. I'm Erica. I'm actually new to Dell Med. I'm a lead clinical informaticist, but came from a clinical background. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner turned informaticist. And prior to Dell Med was at a startup. And I think some things that are working really well here, I'm new, I started in December, is this Dell Med is kind of like a startup within a larger institution. So it's got a little bit more capital and backing, but has a lot of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit that I think has been really cool in my short time thus far here. And then the other question before was around like bottlenecks and barriers to innovation. One thing I've noticed here in general, and also just anywhere, including previous places I've been at, is sometimes folks don't understand what other people are doing, like different roles, clinical folks not necessarily being fluent into technical specifications, technical folks maybe not being close enough to the problem that's trying to be solved. And so those are things that I've noticed, and I'm really happy to be here and thankful for this event that y'all are putting on.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's particularly difficult for clinicians to be involved in clinical work, or commercialization, because your schedule is accounted for. So in general, getting the right team in place is the key. It sounds like that's going well for you, which is fantastic. But got to somehow find the people and that sort of cross-disciplinary activity between engineers and clinicians and software people so that you can actually move an idea forward. It sounds like that's working well for you. Is that what you're saying?
In progress. I think we're all really learning what we all do, myself included, and it's really exciting to see what's happening.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just offer that there's a core principle I have of students as catalysts. Mm-hmm. So the faculty don't have time, but if they've got a student to partner that student can really be a way to leverage. And then if you're like me, I learn with the students. And so it becomes a true partnership. And I'm just for the audience, that means it could be an undergrad, it could be a grad student, but it could be a medical student. It could be a resident. We have roughly 500 residents in our medical school program. And what I'm excited about is that we're trying to work on empowering the residents, because we're hiring a whole series of MDs to expand our medical center. And I figure if we've trained them in the innovation cycle as a resident, then they're also building their network at the same time, right? So it's their core competency and then their network. And then the residents and fellows can amplify the current faculty for what they want to do, right? And so that vertical training, by the way, is not normal, as you know, right? It was not normal at Mayo for this kind of stuff. And so that's the kinds of thing that we're trying to build out from scratch. So I want to ask that when I asked you to come, you said yes. So why did you say yes?
Well, Steve is one of these people that I don't know how well you all know Steve, but Steve is one of the most creative and activating people that I know. He's done so much for me in my career. So honestly, you asked me to be here, I'm going to be here.
Thank you, Pam.
But this idea of my life is really given over to unlocking and unleashing and transforming. That's what everything that I do is around that. And I know those are maybe, kind of soft words, but I want for people to discover, what is my purpose on this planet, and what is it I'm going to do about that? And I want people to be freed up to do those things. That's really important to me. It's why I'm doing everything that I'm doing. And so I think having spent a lot of time around scientists and, people with PhDs and academic researchers, I think it's a passion that I have to help universities to really allow people to lean into those things. And, I think it's really, really important to look at who are you. And if you don't care about commercialization, you can do all the training that you want. It's just not going to be something that is necessarily what you should be doing. But if you have an interest in that, don't let the perceptions of what should or shouldn't be stop you from doing that. It's every way I've been successful in my career is by essentially going against what the conventional wisdom was. And as academic researchers, I mean, that's what you're doing anyway. But, for my PhD, this will date me, but so I am a co-inventor of the semiconductor laser that made it possible for long-haul fiber optic networks. So there was a time when you could just have, fiber optic networks within a building or a city, but you couldn't go from city to city, let alone across the country, let alone around the globe. So I and my research group invented the laser that made that possible. And I can still remember standing in front of 20, at a conference, there was 100 people in the audience. We were presenting our findings, and everybody I'd ever been reading about was sitting in front of me. And I was so nervous to present to these people because we were going to tell them, you said this couldn't be done and you were wrong about it. And here's the results. And so it's not easy to do that, but I think that really sort of putting aside the preconceived notions, the structures that are in place, and just really looking for who am I and what do I want to do? And if commercialization is that thing that you want to do, or maybe you want to get your idea onto the world to really make an impact, and it's go for it. You just gotta go for it.
Okay, what do we have? So I would like to let's think about some audience questions, but I just want to offer that with somebody with a foot in academia and a foot outside of academia, what I'm amazed at is how much innovation is so much faster now outside of academia. It is an inversion of that traditional scope. And actually, the AI disruption is the universities are undergoing a massive transformation. So I would argue this current change is not a choice, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's all about empowerment. And so it's empowerment whether you want to stay inside in academia, and that would be fantastic, but you're going to have, because we have to build and change inside academia. And then outside of academia, there's enormous opportunity to build while all of this huge disruption underway. And so anyway, to turn it to the audience. Do you have any questions for Pam? Come on, we have an awesome speaker. Martin, you have any questions? Ruben?
Yeah, I actually would like to ask if you could speak to perhaps a little bit around the density or the necessity for density, right? So we're bringing here people together in this room. We're bringing people from Minnesota, but also we are part of a university that has 13 institutions across a gigantic state, right? As we're moving into a space where AI is able to shorten distances exponentially and significantly, what is your opinion on bringing people in the same room, and do we need that to move forward?
I would say absolutely. Yeah, I think you need a combination. It's bringing people together to create that critical mass of thinking, is absolutely essential. So there's building your own ecosystem within this community, and then there's connecting where you have synergies. Even in the Midwest, the Midwest has really struggled to create enough venture capital financing to really make a leap, in terms of the number of startups that get financed. And there's lots of cities that are close together, and there still isn't that much coordination. There's less than you would think, but over time that's happening. So you really have to, you have to do both. You have to build locally while you're reaching out. I think AI can help with that, but it's still getting people together. Yeah.
Proximity. Proximity matters.
Absolutely.
So knowing that a lot of good technologies can die on the shelf from many different reasons, what do you think, other than the technology, the science being solid, are some of the kind of hidden factors that will make a team and the technology successful in commercialization? There's the obvious ones that we think of. Do they have enough capital? Do the people have enough know-how? Are they embedded clinically? But what are some of the more unseen ones that you've experienced in your career that you think can really make or break whether or not something is successful?
Yeah, the number one thing for the technology is product market fit. So I'm using language that may be familiar, but I see 1,000 companies a year. 99% of them don't really have product market fit, even though they think they do. They haven't done the work to understand is my product reading directly on that market? So that's, from a technology perspective, that's the number one thing. From a people perspective, it's they're not able to see that. They're not able to see that they don't have product market fit, or they're not able to see, I'm not the right person to lead this company. So it's the internal barriers that people carry with them. Those are the two biggies.
And if I may ask a follow-up question to that, what would you say to give people advice to overcome those internal barriers that you mentioned?
Well, first of all, is to recognize that they're there. So, and the work that we do, if you're curious about our programs, Capita 3 Leader, that's the work that we do, is we do cohort-based leadership development programs where we give people the opportunity to see what their internal barriers are, transcend them, so they can very quickly go on and produce really impactful results. Martin's taken that program. So that's one thing. But the main thing is just being willing to look inside. What am I carrying with me that's potentially impeding me? So a really common one for women is imposter syndrome. And I always say, don't diagnose yourself with an incurable disease. Imposter syndrome is just an undiscerned fear or limiting belief that's not been addressed. So the willingness to actually take a look, and then the willingness to do the work to overcome what you see.
So capital. The valley of despair seems to be becoming more like the Grand Canyon of despair. Early stage funding seems harder to come by. Late stage funding or exits seem to be bigger but fewer. I could be wrong on that. So the gap between the early stage and the late stage seems to getting further apart. There are some areas, there are some states that are taking some rather innovative approaches to commingling public and private investment. I'll use as an example, like New Jersey. New Jersey is auctioning off business tax credits to corporations and using that revenue. So corporations are getting a tax credit at 85 cents on the dollar, right? So they get discounted tax credit. The state uses that revenue, certifies an investor group and says, well, we'll match your investments dollar for dollar up to some dollar amount. In New Jersey's case, it's $500,000 if it's a New Jersey-based company. So from an investor perspective, they're getting a 1-for-1 match of public money that doesn't dilute their stake. Have you seen other models like that in other states? Do you see pros and cons to that, like gotchas that one has to be careful of? Have you looked at that at all or heard about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a number of states provide public funding to match private funding, and that can be state level funding. Yeah, we had a very powerful program in the state of Iowa. Minnesota does a teeny bit. I think Minnesota's program is not quite structured properly. In Iowa, the state of Iowa would give out $100,000 to $500,000 grants. It would be pre-SBIR. And so that's the gap funding that I was talking about earlier, that's so critical. That can work really, really well if you have people who understand what to pick, right? So I think that, that's really the most important thing, is having the right people make those decisions.
And then I have one more question over here, and then we should probably wrap up soon after this question to head to the reception.
Hello. What data points are you looking for when you're making an investment to validate that product market fit? Is it both from like the clinical and scientific side and from the business side?
Yeah, so from the clinical side, we're looking for, a data set, or, sometimes a lot of the companies we invest in are forging new markets. So product market fit is something that can only come from understanding what is needed in the marketplace. So we're looking for the people who've been in that field and they really get, here's what's missing and here's why. So it's kind of a process of understanding what they know and validating that. When there is a market already established, it really going out, doing the customer discovery, going out, and whether it's feedback from clinicians, whether it's, we do invest in some companies that are direct to consumer. So it's getting the feedback from the customer to really demonstrate that there is product market fit. But it's a process of, it's a stepwise process, right? You're really betting on the jockey and their experience and their ability to really prove over time that there's truly product market fit.
Pam, that was fantastic. Are we good, Martin?
Yep, we're great. Thank you both very, very much for this inaugural version of the Visionaries in Innovation and Practice. I want to thank everybody here for your participation. So thank you.
Thank you.